Think back to the start of the conflict in Ukraine. Remember that message from the European Union? It seemed so clear, so united. We stand together, we are cutting off Russian energy. A really powerful promise.
It absolutely was a promise of uh, profound geopolitical solidarity broadcast to the whole world.
But have you ever wondered what happens when a promise like that crashes right into, well, the hard reality of economic need? Because it seems behind that unified front, there's another story being written. A kind of secret ledger, maybe?
That's a good way to put it. The numbers definitely tell a contradictory story, one of, well, let's call it strategic divergence, maybe even betrayal, depending on how you look at it.
Okay, let's try and unpack that. We're going to look into how this raw economic pressure, combined with some pretty big legal loopholes, seems to be cracking that collective EU will.
Yeah, and it's not just about energy contracts. It's really about what this internal rebellion, as you called it, signals for global alliances and maybe even for the future of financial power itself.
So how do we get our heads around this breakdown?
I think we have to look past the official statements, the political speeches. We need to really dig into the difficult, pragmatic choices national leaders felt they had to make.
It wasn't necessarily about right or wrong for them.
For them, it seems it was much more about survival. National self-interest just, well, it decisively trumped the bloc's unified message in these critical areas. And that's exactly what the trade data is now showing us quite starkly.
And that data really is staggering when you look at it. I mean, yes, the EU as a whole did manage to reduce its overall reliance on Russian energy. That's true.
Right, the overall trend is down.
But underneath that, several key member states have been moving hard in the complete opposite direction. And we're not talking small amounts here.
No, these are massive, undeniable increases in Russian energy imports, specifically LNG in many cases.
Who are we talking about? Give us the list.
Well, the list really highlights where the cracks are.
Yeah.
You've got France seeing imports jump by nearly 40%. The Netherlands had a, frankly, huge 72% increase.
72%, wow.
Yeah. And Portugal, starting from a lower base, but their imports more than doubled. Plus, these Romania, Croatia, Belgium, Hungary, all significantly decreasing the flow of energy and therefore funds towards Moscow.
Okay, that's the bit that's hard to square with the public pledge, isn't it? Billions of euros flow into the Kremlin directly from EU nations.
Exactly.
So if the promise was so firm, why the breach? I mean, I can maybe understand a country like Hungary with its historical pipeline dependency, but France, Netherlands, these are economic giants.
Well, for some of the smaller economies you mentioned, like Portugal or Croatia, the driving force is pretty straightforward. It's about the money. Cold, hard cash.
Meaning?
Meaning that Russian liquefied natural gas, that's LNG, natural gas cooled way down so you can ship it, it's just often significantly cheaper than the alternatives.
Right. And the U.S., they stepped up production massively, didn't they? Trying to become Europe's replacement supplier.
They did. Yeah, a huge effort. But American LNG, well, it generally comes with a higher price tag. You've got longer transport routes, the cost of new infrastructure they had to build quickly, plus just market demand pushing prices up.
So for some countries, it's a brutal choice between principle and price.
Absolutely. Think about a nation facing, really high inflation, slow growth. That price difference isn't trivial. It could be the difference between affordable heating bills for citizens or crippling ones, or the difference between factories staying open or shutting down, costing thousands of jobs.
So faced with that,
The calculation becomes almost painfully rational, doesn't it? Survival, domestic stability. It just overrides the geopolitical mandate. It has to, from their perspective.
Okay, so the economics make a grim kind of sense. But how is it even legally possible, given the sanctions? Are they breaking the rules?
Well, that's the fascinating part. They're not really breaking the rules. They're walking straight through a door that Brussels itself kind of left open. The key is in the details, the fine print of the EU's own sanctions. They were very specifically designed to hit Russia's oil revenues hard. So they banned Russian seaborne crude oil. That was the big move.
Right.
But they intentionally left a massive loophole for liquefied natural gas. LNG was largely exempted.
Why would they do that? Didn't that give Russia an escape route right from the start?
It did, effectively. But you have to remember the context back then. A total energy cutoff, including all gas, pipeline, and LNG, would likely have caused an immediate economic collapse in several member states that were just too dependent, especially on pipeline gas at that moment.
So it was a compromise to get everyone to agree on the oil ban.
Exactly. A necessary compromise for unity at that time. But now, that compromise is being, well, ruthlessly exploited by these seven nations.
Yeah.
They aren't smuggling. They're just using the legal framework the EU itself created.
Which brings us to another layer that makes this even murkier, especially for those big players like France and the Netherlands. This idea of the energy laundromat, what's that about?
Right? This is where you see some pretty sophisticated uh, profiteering going on. Countries that have the big coastal infrastructure, the massive ports, the advanced LNG terminals needed to turn that liquid gas back into usable gas.
The regasification facilities?
Precisely. They are acting as Europe's central energy hubs. They import enormous quantities of this cheaper Russian LNG, and then they turn around and re-export it
To other countries.
to other buyers. Yeah, sometimes within Europe, sometimes even further afield like Asia, and they do it for a profit.
So it's classic arbitrage, buy low, sell high, using their infrastructure
You
advantage.
got it. They charge fees for the regasification process, and they pocket the difference between the discounted Russian price and the higher market rate they can sell it for.
So when we see France's imports spike by nearly 40%, it doesn't automatically mean France itself is burning all that gas.
Not necessarily. It means French energy companies or companies operating there are acting as very profitable middlemen. It really blurs the lines. It makes it harder to track who is truly dependent versus who is simply, well, cashing in on the whole situation.
Okay, so that's the sort of quiet maneuvering, but then there was the loud rebellion too, wasn't there? Hungary really stood out.
Oh, absolutely. Hungary wasn't subtle. They became the poster child for openly challenging the EU consensus on this.
What did they actually do?
Their government basically said very publicly that a full energy embargo would be like an atomic bomb for their economy. They weren't going to accept that kind of economic pain quietly.
And they backed it up.
They did. They used their most powerful weapon within the EU system, the requirement for unanimity on major decisions. They used their veto power.
Ah, the veto.
By threatening or using the veto, Hungary effectively shielded its own economic interests. But more importantly, perhaps, it proved that just one single nation, if it refused to go along, could basically paralyze the collective political will of all 27 members.
It shattered that illusion of a totally united front.
Completely.
Yeah.
Especially on something as critical as economic warfare.
So if Hungary's the loud rebel, what about the quieter giants like France or the Netherlands? Why would their governments risk the political fallout, the reputational damage?
I think for them it comes down to intense domestic pressure. Those sort of invisible handcuffs we talked about earlier.
Meaning the pressure back home.
Yeah. For those governments, the immediate risk isn't so much an angry phone call from Brussels. It's more about facing citizens protesting because their energy bills have suddenly quadrupled. Or it's about major industries threatening to pack up and move somewhere with cheaper, more stable energy, costing thousands of local jobs.
That's an impossible choice for a leader.
It's an incredibly difficult calculation. Geopolitical principle looks good on the world stage, but if your own citizens are freezing or losing their jobs, your political survival depends on fixing that first. Stable, affordable energy becomes priority number one, almost regardless of the broader unity.
And this whole European drama, it's not happening in a vacuum, is it? It must be causing ripples elsewhere, particularly across the Atlantic. How's Washington viewing all this?
Well, you can imagine it's causing some serious tension. Think about it from the U.S. perspective. They made a huge strategic bet, didn't they? Ramping up their own LNG production and infrastructure at breakneck speed, positioning themselves as Europe's new, reliable energy savior.
Right, stepping in to fill the gap left by Russia.
Exactly. But then, when major European allies, key partners, start choosing cheaper Russian gas instead, even if it's partly through this laundromat system, well, that fundamentally undermines Washington's entire strategy.
And hurts them financially too, presumably.
Absolutely. It undercuts a key ally financially while simultaneously sending billions of euros back to the very country the sanctions were supposed to isolate. It really reveals how powerful economic incentives can fracture even the tightest strategic partnerships.
Loyalty might be temporary, but a discount feels permanent sometimes.
That's one way to look at it, yeah. And while Europe is tied in these knots, wrestling with the moral and economic dilemmas, look east
To China, India.
to China and India, exactly. Their calculation seems much, much simpler. They are just swooping in, buying up enormous amounts of Russian oil and gas at discounted prices. No hesitation.
They're not taking sides in the political fight.
Not really. They're just taking the best deal available to fuel their own economies, boosting their competitiveness with cheaper energy. Pure pragmatism.
And this is where it gets potentially really significant in the long run, isn't it? The currency aspect.
This can be the real game changer. China isn't just buying the energy. They are actively negotiating to pay for significant portions of it in their own currency, the yuan or renminbi, not in US dollars.
And India's looking at similar things.
India is exploring similar non-dollar payment mechanisms too, like using rupees or other arrangements.
So what does that actually mean, paying outside the dollar?
Well, think about it. For decades, the US dollar has been the world's dominant reserve currency. Most major commodities, especially oil and gas, are traded in dollars globally. This gives the U.S. enormous financial leverage. It's the bedrock of their ability to impose effective sanctions, for instance.
It's their ultimate economic weapon, in a way.
You could say that. So when large volumes of crucial energy trade start happening outside the dollar system, settled in yuan or other currencies, it's a quiet but potentially devastating attack on that very foundation of Western financial power.
Just chipping away at the dollar's dominance purely through opportunistic trade deal.
Precisely. It's a slow erosion driven by economic self-interest, but it points towards that shifting global order we keep talking about, a world where financial power might not be as concentrated as it once was.
So with all this internal division, the loopholes, the open defiance, where does it leave the European project itself, Brussels?
That's the uncomfortable question, isn't it? I think it really exposes a core, perhaps systemic weakness within the EU structure. The European Commission in Brussels, well, it can propose laws, it can make grand statements, it can coordinate.
But it can't actually force sovereign nations to comply.
Not easily, no.
Yeah.
Especially not on issues deemed absolutely vital to national security or economic survival, like energy. There's no central EU authority that can just command obedience from Paris or Berlin or Budapest on something like this.
So the Brussels bureaucracy, it's sort of a paper tiger.
In some respects, yes. It can look loud and imposing, but when faced with the hardest choices driven by national self-interest, its actual power to enforce can be quite limited. The whole EU machinery, it's complex, it's consensus-based.
Built for cooperation in peacetime, maybe?
Exactly. It was built for an era of gradual integration and cooperation, not necessarily for rapid, high-stakes economic warfare where national survival instincts kick in so strongly. When it's put to that kind of ultimate test, the center struggles to hold.
So bringing it all together, what's the big picture here?
I think it crystallizes a fundamental truth about where we are globally. The era of, perhaps, a single superpower dictating terms, or even a tightly unified bloc acting as one, that seems to be fading.
Replaced by what?
Replaced by a much more fractured, multipolar world. Every nation is increasingly acting like a free agent, constantly evaluating short-term deals that maximize their own advantage. Loyalty seems temporary, leverage is key, and the underlying rule seems to be just pure, cold pragmatism.
So for anyone listening, what's the takeaway? What does this mean for us?
I think it means the kind of Western unity we might have taken for granted, maybe built on an era of relatively stable and affordable energy, was perhaps more fragile than we thought.
This isn't just a temporary blip then. This is the new reality.
It certainly feels like it. This could be the new normal. We should probably expect alliances to shift more quickly, perhaps become more transactional, and expect economic tools like energy prices or access to be used much more frequently as political weapons.
So understanding these dynamics, the energy markets, the currency shifts, this primacy of national self-interest, it's crucial now.
Absolutely essential, I'd say. If you want to really understand the forces shaping our economies, our security, our future, you have to grasp these new, maybe harsher rules of the game.
It's fascinating. The economic crisis basically forced Europe into this choice between sticking to its principles and ensuring its survival. It makes you wonder, if the dollar's dominance keeps getting challenged by energy deals settled in yuan or other currencies, what's the next big strategic asset the West might discover it no longer commands quite so easily?
That is the provocative question, isn't it? What comes next?